Welcome to the Organizational Transformation Kung Fu Podcast with your hosts, Sandi Verrecchia and Jennifer Long.
So welcome to another episode of Organizational Transformation Kung Fu. As you know, all our listeners, we call it OT Kung Fu for short, and we called it that because of the leadership change and the change in organizations. We know for change to take root and to happen that there has to be patience and time allowing for it to happen. And any kind of change within an organization, it requires the patience of a Kung Fu artist. And so we have aptly named our podcast Organizational Transformation Kung Fu. We are super excited today to have a new guest with us, sort of following on our series of talking with women, having women's voices on leadership out in the universe, coming off our accolades of our podcast being one of the strong voices for women, with women out on the podcast world. And so we're following up with that, and we're talking with Cara Cameron, who is the Chief Future of Work for Portage Mutual Insurance Company. So we're going to unpack what a Chief Future of Work person does in a moment. But a little bit about Cara. She has been within human resources and a strategic executive for over 15 years in the mutual insurance company. She does have an accounting background, which we will not hold against you in any kind of way. But she is passionate about developing people and has developed expertise in areas of strategic management, collaborative cultures, and elevated leadership. She has held various high positions, CEO, CFO within organizations within the mutual sector, and she has been on many boards within the mutual sector and currently sits on the NAMIC Farm Mutual Conference Board and the NAMIC Annual Convention Conference Board. So I've had the pleasure of knowing Cara for, 10 years or so, and have admired her greatly over the years. So we wanted to sort of start with, what does a Chief Future of Work do?
Yeah, tell us more, Cara. And wow, I didn't realize you were such a badass. So welcome to the podcast.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's awesome to be here. And in terms of talking, kind of going back to what you were referring to, Sandi, about, women and influencers, and I consider myself a proud individual and influencer, and that I love to talk about organizational change and people and leadership, but without the titles. So I think the most popular question I have received since joining Portage Mutual and having this role is, what does a Chief Future of Work do? Like, what does that actually mean? Where does that sit inside the organizational chart? And my kids ask me that all the time. So what do you do? And so in terms of kind of unpacking it, we look at it at Portage Mutual around, how do we really understand how the changing workforce is impacting our organization? Like, that's how we kind of break it down. And then how does the changing workforce impact our individual teams, our company as a whole? And then organizationally, how do we plan and how do we respond to those shifts that are happening around us inside of our communities? And then ultimately, how's that impacting our company in the mutual insurance space? So that's how we kind of define it. And then we go a little further and say, okay, what are those trends and developments that strategically are really, really important to our organization? So how do people in societies want to work? How do our employees specifically want to work? How do they want to be led? Because post-pandemic, that is super different. That's what we're seeing compared to pre-pandemic. And then ultimately, what are employees today looking for in their employee experience? And so we segment it into those categories when we define my job description, how I positively influence the organization, how the human resource team kind of supports the full organization, as opposed to a human resource function that is more maybe admin in nature, which the organization that I'm with, historically, organizational change has been wrapped up under the HR umbrella and has been really just an admin type of function. And so we've turned that on its head, created this role and said, no, we want to see change throughout the organization. We want it to be supported. We want to have leaders involved, and we want that to be a big piece of our strategic plan. So when Portage had reached out and we were discussing this opportunity, it was interesting because we developed the job description together. We embedded it inside of our 5-year strategic plan. And right now we're heading into year 2 of actually living that strategic plan under what we call our people pillar, which the human resource team owns. But ultimately, it's the employees in the organization that are doing all of the work, and we support them along the way. So I'm hoping that answers your question around what it is and what does it mean and what do you do?
That's awesome. That's some serious intention organizationally at a level I think the pandemic is forcing us into, but not a whole, it feels like a real solid vision around how to get your arms around this part of organizational shift, which is fantastic. Absolutely.
So nice to hear, and so future focused, right? So a lot of times we're finding HR is not as focused, as you say, it's more admin. It's sort of looking at the past. It's sort of, we've always done it this way, sometimes in that way, but to be so intentional about that future of work and the future of employees and engaging the employees at that level, you must find when you're talking about this to others that it a concept that might be a bit foreign.
Yes. And so what I'm experiencing is we'll believe it when we see it. And it takes a lot of time for folks to believe the change because it takes time to see the change. And so what I'm experiencing is we're having small pockets throughout the organization of real progression and success because of the leaders and the support inside of those teams. And so we're really getting momentum around that now. And as other teams start to see it, it's becoming more real. And as implementation of our strategic plan initiatives become more alive and as it makes its way through the teams, then it becomes more of a, oh, there's accountability here now. Because lots of organizations, we strive to focus on what we think is super important. And we sometimes fall down on that accountability piece, primarily because it's uncomfortable or we're just not sure how to do that part. Or we have really great pockets of it, but as a full organization, perhaps we're not as successful as we want to be. And so we're starting with kind of a multifaceted approach of executive coaching. We're bringing in micro learnings. We have great support from our president and CEO. And so I believe all those pieces need to really work together because ultimately we always tend to look at that organizational chart and you follow that chart. And so it really involves having those key leaders in those key, what are perceived to be those powerful positions. I don't like titles, so I get caught up in that sometimes. But I recognize that most employees have that perception that a senior leadership team and/or executive team and/or the owner or president and CEO, how they model themselves, how they show up, and what they share as priorities. That's what gets focused across the organization. And so we have a CEO that's super supportive of that and messages it, supports the teams and the managers on that. And so that has allowed us to gain more momentum in that space. And I think that's the number one requirement is around that tone at the top and really modeling those behaviors. Otherwise, we tend to say one thing and then we act differently and we don't get the progress perhaps that we're looking for.
Well, and I think that executives at the top can sometimes feel short-sighted. They get excited about this thing, they get all bought in, they get all rallied around it, and then 6 months go by and some shiny object in the organization takes their attention. And then they're like, well, we did that. We've been doing that. And it's like, no, you're going to need to keep doing this for a long time because I think that's is it really happening? We don't see it yet. And they're distracted by whatever the needs of the business are. And this effort to really support and stick in the role modeling hasn't really seeded as much as they've thought it had. And I think that's part of the beauty of a role like yours, right? Is to keep pulling them back in and go, hang on a sec, we're not done here. We're not even close.
Fair. Or we hear something along the lines of, we tried that before and it did not work. And so really unpacking, what did we do before? Like, those are always learning opportunities for myself and the teams that I work directly with. It's like, oh, okay, let's talk about that. Let's understand what that was. And it generally was a siloed action in a very finite period of time. And it could have been 1 year, 5 year, 10 years ago. And so really, like, we call it honoring legacy and understanding for that future focus, and just really dialoguing on, okay, what took place, understanding the complexities and the culture that was present then, or what were those factors driving it. And then we just kind of break it down to understand it. And then we tend to call it relevant history. Awesome. And then we recognize it and we move forward with a very intention and clear focus, understanding our learnings from the past. That's how we've been trying to approach it.
That's great.
Fantastic. One of the the whole change model is, creating that awareness and having people understand the need for change. And so people aren't stuck in the past and they have a voice. That's really important that you're engaging with them at that level so that they can go on that journey with you. You were just talking about modeling the way, and the Center for Creative Leadership talks about transformational leadership as number one step is modeling the way, and trying to get organizational people at the top to do that. They also talk about encouraging the heart, inspiring a shared vision, enabling others to act, and challenging the process. When you're thinking about transformational leadership, Cara, how would you describe it?
I tend to look at the people side of it because of the work that I'm primarily focused on. So I see it as significantly influencing how whether it's our employees, colleagues, etc., how we're embracing the change that's happening around us, how we're accepting it, and then how we're responding to it. So significantly influencing that. That's how I look at the transformational leadership journey. But I also see it as a multi-step journey in a very supported manner. And I know that organizations will embrace change and they may have a certain focus or future desired state that they want to get to. And then it can be a very linear path. I believe in transformational leadership. It's not linear. We have an anchor. We have an anchor in terms of where we want to get to. And we're very cognizant of what's changing around us. And we really do want to bring folks along with us on the journey. So we've invested a lot in learning about the data in our teams around engagement survey results. And so we worked with Gallup directly over the past 12 months so that we could benchmark for our locations, our industry, kind of where we were on the engagement scale. And we wanted to be able to break that down to understand the different kind of cohorts of our teams in terms of what drives them. And so from there, we can understand where they are on that change cycle. And Sandi, I can't agree any further. It's so important to understand where we are in that cycle and to know what it looks like and to be able to embrace that resistant, messy phase. All the good stuff happens in there, but it's super uncomfortable in there. And so when we know where our teams are in that journey, then I think we can best support them and then help them as we move through the remainder of the journey. And so I don't see transformational change as that linear piece going through the cycles. I see it as recognizing the milestones when we're there, but also understanding the differences of our individuals along the way. When I was early on in my journey, I understood, kind of like generations, a little bit, like those generational differences when you go to seminars. I understood personalities a little bit. It took me quite a journey to be able to kind of overlay everything in a business situation or in an actual scenario, right? The real life environment that you're working through. And so now I find that as we're working with teams, we can understand where they are and we can see their lens through that kind of multiple perspectives view. And I think that's what really drives transformational change, because you can meet folks with where they're at. And then you have a clear lens of where you're going. Generally, it's the leaders that have that lens of where you're going. And as an employee, when you're in that messy phase, you're just looking for that light and you're looking for someone to kind of guide you and meet you where you're at, and then recognize how to get to the rest of it and what that looks like. And so that's how we've been approaching transformational change, is meeting folks where they are in the phase that they're at. And phase of life is a big piece of that we're really
So
looking at and talking about now as well.
what does that look like, right? So meeting a team where they are. And so what that says to me is you've got teams of teams, multiple teams. I don't know. I'm not sure how many teams we're talking, but right. So change is happening in different places at different times in different ways. And so how is it, how are you meeting them where they are? What does that look like for you guys?
We have different levels of it. And so at the organizational level, that's where our president and CEO is really messaging his vision and light for the company very clearly. So that's a piece that we're all very connected and cohesive on. We know where we're going. We just don't necessarily know what it means to us. And so from there, that's where we move down to that leadership level. And so the way that we've approached connecting with each employee and understanding where they're at, and this is where the future of work piece really comes into understanding where is your team at and where are your team members at. So we're doing that through regular touch points, one-to-one touch points between leaders and their direct team members. So intentional, whether it's weekly or bi-weekly, depends on the size of the team, those very intentional 30 to 60 minute touch points to understand where that individual is around change, around the priorities, around their learning, what supports they need. And so those one-to-one interactions are happening regularly now, which is awesome. It's a big investment from a leader perspective, but it is some of the best mentorship for employees along the way. And we also have group and team meets as well. And so that allows teams to really understand how the organizational goal and where they are at individually comes together to support the team in terms of, from their team perspective, what is their key role in the organization? How do their contributions matter? And how that ties in. So it's really that multifaceted approach where we have the overall CEO level setting on the organization perspective. We have the teams really understanding where they are together. And then we have those individual touch points as well, so that folks are getting the mentorship support and guidance that they need along the way.
Coming off of what Cara was saying and how intentional the organization has been at all levels. And many organizations start off with this great intentionality to sort of fall back into old habits. And how is your organization really keeping that alive and not allowing that to get back into the busy work gets in the way of actual transformational leadership responsibilities?
This has been a big topic for us over the last year. So this time last year, we were getting very clear on what are we looking to accomplish in our people pillar, people first strategy in 2023. And so a big piece around that was around setting performance management expectations and also leadership expectations. And so that's how we became very intentional on how we were approaching it. So our team worked with other departments, of course, but we led on new performance management processes for the whole organization. And so it really recalibrated and reset expectations from both the employee's perspective and from the leader's perspective on what's expected from mentoring, coaching perspective, and then how do we embed that into what we're looking to achieve in 2023.
Now, when you reconfigured performance management, how much of your workforce is remote? I mean, what's your mix based on the new world?
So we are highly remote.
Okay.
We have approximately 80% of our employees that are fully remote and or hybrid. And when I say hybrid, they're more remote than in office on that hybrid mix. And approximately 20% are more in office.
And how is that different than what you had before?
We were 100% in office pre-COVID.
Okay. Oh, so it's massively different. Okay.
Significantly different. And we surveyed staff throughout COVID, through the whole pandemic kind of journey to get a lens of where are we? What do our employees want? How can we accommodate? And then how do we rework all of our processes to be able to support folks that want to be able to work hybrid and remote. And so for us, it allowed us to really up-level access to skills that we didn't have previously. And so when we're connecting between leaders and team members, we're generally doing it like this because we have so many in terms like this virtually, and that we have so many team members that are either working from home or they happen to be home that day and they're in office on another day. So we had to really up level our tech skills around what's expected in a connection point with team members, the frequency of it. And so that's how we became very intentional on how to embrace change and mentor all of our employees along the way. So organizationally at the top level, our president and CEO has been very clear that we embrace remote, flexible, and hybrid work. And we also want to make sure that we're modeling the behaviors that align with our culture of being collaborative and connected together. And so we do that through one-to-one touch points. It's usually weekly or bi-weekly, just depending on the team size, between a leader. And we define a leader as anyone who's leading a team from a team leadership perspective. And they meet weekly or bi-weekly with all of their team members one-on-one. And they also have regular team meets, and that can be weekly or bi-weekly as well. And that's so that every team understands how what they're doing aligns with the organization, and there's purpose to every team. And so we openly talk about that. And then in those one-to-one touch points with our leaders, it's around where are we at in terms of our priorities? How are we doing? What other supports or dependencies do we need? And then from an ongoing learning and development perspective, where are we on that journey? And so we do that regularly. So what every individual needs, hopefully, is being addressed in those connection points. And we've also given guidance and we support leaders on how to conduct those one-on-ones, because that's really important. And in a face-to-face kind of one-on-one is different than a virtual one-on-one. Some of us do really well virtually. Some of us are less comfortable with that. And so we do coach and support on that piece as well. So our intention is having our president and CEO very clearly articulating support for these types of connection points and leadership expectations. And then from the leader's perspective, they have guidance on how to lead their team meetings, their one-on-ones, and then inside performance management processes, every employee has accountability for the goal. And every employee has a goal of having that connection point with their leader. And every leader has that as well. So it's embedded into the expectations on our annual performance reviews with regular touch points in between, because we don't see performance management as a once a year process. We see it as an ongoing process. And that's why those coaching opportunities are so important. Otherwise, it's just that once a year, done, filed away, and it's not as meaningful, where we want to actually embed it inside of our culture.
I feel like this is music to your ears, Jen.
Well, I'm a big fan of performance management.
And accountability.
Right? Accountability is a big one. So accountability also looks at, organizational accountability for, are you connecting the dots and is it impacting and how is it impacting? Have you gone a whole year? Have your engagement scores changed? What other measures? How do you know? How do you know what you're doing is working?
So we're in the level setting base year phase, in that we're in a 3-year partnership with Gallup around our engagement journey. And so we conducted our first engagement survey in 2023 with Gallup. And so now we have a baseline. And then from there, we will monitor progress as we move forward with the next 2 years. From a performance management perspective, we've moved to a web-based tool, which is amazing. And it allows us to be able to develop the questions, the process, et cetera, and then it's supported by the software. So it's very easy for everyone to be able to engage with it regardless of where they're working. And then it gives us that ability to track progress year after year. Our goals and expectations is embedded inside of what's expected for every employee on a go-forward basis. So we've eased in this year in 2023. Was it beautiful? In theory. How was it implemented? Well, we had to pause and pull back a little bit on some of the dates because we needed more bandwidth and breathing time. This has been a year of an IT conversion for us as well. And so just kind of like balancing all of those organizational priorities, we added in more space and grace along the way on some of the timelines. And now we are literally just completing our first cycle. And so we'll debrief and we'll refine next year as we move into 2024. We have those set very clear goals around learning and development, objectives and expectations for all team members for 2023. And then we'll reset it based on feedback for 2024. And we did that intentionally because we want to up level the skill set of employees for the simple reason that the world outside of our office locations is changing. And so we want to make sure that every employee has the opportunity to learn, develop, and grow in response to innovation and technology changes that are happening around us each and every day. And so that way we're bringing the employee along the way. And we have many long-term employees. Our retention is amazing. Our turnover rates are fabulous. And so we want to make sure that we are investing in all of our employees the same way that we would invest in a new employee when we're seeking to recruit and bring someone in. So we're up leveling along the way, which it can be a little uncomfortable for folks because it's new and different, and we get comfortable with what we know. And so you add in new software, IT conversion, add in some new performance management expectations, new leadership expectations. And so we're just supporting and rebalancing along the way. Everything works together and they support each other. From a resourcing perspective, though, we're very cognizant of building in extra time and slowing down where needed.
Yeah.
Here's where the Kung Fu comes in.
The Kung Fu. So let's talk about resistance. Let's talk about barriers. Let's talk about where you're like, ooh, that wasn't what I was thinking was going to happen. Because I'm sure it hasn't been smooth sailing because, it's people.
Oh, every organization I've been in during times of change, there's always been pockets of resistance. And I think what's different now for myself is I'm more aware of the cycle. And I do believe that learning and education is our biggest friend when it comes to going through these times of change. And so what we've done is we brought in executive coaching for key leaders in the organization. And that, I'll tell you, that concept was new to myself 4 years ago when I had the opportunity. I was in a CEO position at the time, and
What?
I
You've
just
known
needed more
Sandy for
support.
10 years and this was new? Come
It was,
on,
well,
Cara.
it was, I admit it, it was around barrier of you're in a position, at that time I was the CEO. So it's like you hold the highest position in the organization. Shouldn't you know what's coming next or how to lead your team or how to make these things happen that, as a CEO, you need to deliver on in conjunction with directors from the board of directors. So just like navigating all of that, that was my introduction to executive coaching, simply because I knew I needed help and support. And I felt that was a good match for a CEO to be able to up level. I just didn't know. You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know until you know. And
Yeah.
oh, yay, you.
100%. So coming into this role, it was nice because I'd gone through that journey of executive coaching with an organization that was going through a tremendous time of change because they were getting ready for an M&A type of activity. So that was change so that employees were ready for a merger. Here, it's different in that it's change in terms of a company that is growing geographically, and we have a lot of long-term employees, and we have a really ambitious strategic plan, and we want to make sure that everything is well supported. And so we brought in executive coaching for key leaders across the organization. And we do operate in multiple provinces in Canada. So we made sure that we had that geographical diversification as well. And we started with one-on-one coaching. We've moved to group coaching. We're now moving to offboarding. And so going through that whole process has been amazing because leaders now understand how to embed it inside of their teams. And so we do have other leaders that haven't had the opportunity for the coaching. And then it's the top leaders' real responsibility to be able to continue providing that embedding and learning inside of their teams. But in 2024, I know one of our key areas of focus is around the training and development for different positions in the organization and career pathing thereon. And so we will mature on that to make sure that new leaders coming in have that support and that knowledge, and they're set up for success as we go forward. So that's kind of our next step as we move into 2024.
That's
Brilliant.
awesome. So in your learning then, Cara, with people that are listening to this podcast, what are the top 4 attributes that a leader needs to have, or competencies maybe, to be a transformational leader?
Patience. Patience. In that we all navigate and respond to change differently, in our own way, at our own pace. And so, as a leader, I think it's extremely important that we recognize patience is needed on both sides, but also creating the space as a leader to let your team members learn and grow, make mistakes, and together meet them where they are. And I think that is the most important thing, like really honoring folks with where they are. And that to me moves into multiple perspectives. And that's the biggest piece that I've learned through executive coaching is understanding that multiple perspectives isn't understanding a personality type or a generation or a person that is like you. It's more understanding that individual based on their experiences, how they've been developed, what it's been like for them, even in their personal and their social life. All of that blends together and that represents who we are as individuals. And so when we can see through the different lens of multiple perspectives, we're able to best connect with them. And for me, that has all come through executive coaching. It can come through learning and education along the way. It's being able to really understand the multiple perspectives and how other people are interpreting and translating the things that are happening around them. I think as a leader, that is the number one gift that we can give ourselves. And
Yes.
then flexibility and adaptability. It's a key competency for us at Portage. It's a core competency. So it's one that we're all working on as employees. And we have multiple competencies that are worked into our performance management, but that is one of our core
Yeah.
competencies and really giving ourselves space and grace on that one too. Because if you've been in the workforce for a long time, or if you are a baby boomer or closer to that kind of generational cohort, adaptability and flexibility, it was not generally a part of your training and development. And it often wasn't okay in the culture. So really getting vulnerable and authentic around why it's okay now and why others are really looking for it now and why it matters. I
Yeah.
think one of the biggest learnings for me was understanding for that generation that holding information to yourself, that's how you got promoted. That's where your value was based. And so I'm looking at that I'm Generation X, but I'm more on the Gen Z side. And I look at that and I think, but employees generally want it now shared and they want to know what's going on and they want to know where they are. And it's just a whole different paradigm that when you understand that, it's just so much easier to navigate and to work with.
Well, right. And because change is rapid, because volatility, because all of those things, your ability when I'm working with transformational leadership, it's this thing around learning agility. How fast can you learn, unlearn, and relearn to deal with what's happening and embrace all of those things? And so that whole agility, flexibility, interpersonal risk, performance risk that you're willing to do as things move is definitely leadership capability now. Before it didn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
Excellent.
Wow, I'm so impressed with sort of your organization and the position they've taken on this, because you don't see it a lot. There's glimpses of it, people trying, but I guess that
Yeah.
intentionality that Portage has put around it has. Well, we'll have you back in a year and see where your baseline has moved.
Now, are your coaches internal or external? Are you cultivating a whole strategy around the coaching since you're doing this at scale?
We've started with external. And when it comes to coaching senior leaders and executive teams, I do believe that external is the safest way to proceed. And if you're looking for external perspectives, other perspectives, multiple perspectives, if you're looking to really align with future focus, in my view, unless you have an exceptional employee that has had that experience and exposure, amazing if you've had that. Most organizations that I've seen have not. And so we started with external to bring in that knowledge that we didn't have ourselves. And then through the group coaching, we're then transferring that knowledge from external to our senior leaders, and then they're branching it out to their key leaders. And so that's where it embeds itself more through the organization. Now, I have seen this happen previously where you build it up and then you lose it. And that was as a result of not having that intention with it that we talked about earlier. And it's just so important to have that. And the other piece is accountability. If the accountability is not present and consistent, then it's not a great investment of time, in my view, because the modeling and the behaviors, they don't come to fruition. And then it becomes conversation, but then the employees don't believe it because they're not seeing it. And then that vicious cycle just kind of lives on, and then it loses its credibility. So that accountability piece, it's the hardest. I think it's the hardest.
Yeah.
And it is the most uncomfortable for sure. That is, though, where the external coaching is so helpful, because as leaders, as we're going through that messy phase, and when we can't see that shining light at the end, or we just can't make sense of what's happening around us, generally, when you have a really great external coach, they can guide you through that. And so they make sense of it through your lens, and can meet myself where I am on that as well. So I find that to be extremely powerful. Consulting is not meant to be there forever. So when you're engaging on that, it's to have it for a period of time and to make sure that we're making the most of it when we have it. As I said, we're moving into offboarding in 2024, and that's exciting. It means that we've matured, we've progressed, and we're now translating more of it so we can do more of it internally. And then from my team's perspective, it's making sure that we have the processes and the systems in place to keep it alive and to keep it going.
Awesome. So to kind of put a bow on this for listeners, the top 5 things that you found have given you the gift of this journey that you're on right now, that you could say, if you're going to go down this transformational leadership things, here's the top 5.
So I would say resource yourself really, really well. Whether it's, you find the external that works for you, or if you have the internal, amazing, but make sure you're resourcing yourself really, really well. I would say make sure you're really clear on your purpose and your vision. Because if you do not have that anchor, then it's a whole lot of change and messiness for no real why as an employee. It's not making sense, and it doesn't translate. And so why would we want to be uncomfortable and invest in something that doesn't translate? As an employee, I certainly wouldn't want to. Patience for sure. And that goes for everyone, because leaders don't know it all. They're learning. We're all learning. And it takes a whole lot of patience, I think, in organizations to really create that supported environment. I would also say rethink about how you're leveraging your HR team. If you're fortunate enough to have one, if you're of that size, rethink where they're at in the organization and how they can best lead and guide. So I know HR has been that back office kind of function in the past. Yes, there's that component, and there's a world of opportunity inside of HR to be able to have that future focus. I think that is key. Lots of opportunities. And then I would say number 5 is have a really clear plan. Because without that, it's, again, why are we doing this? And why are we investing in this? And what are the KPIs? What are the measures? What does that look like? In the industry I'm in, we have a ton of what we call detailer personalities. I have that in my personality. It's my number 2. And if you don't know the plan or the why, and you hear language like, oh, we'll figure it out, or that'll come, then what we hear as detailers is there's no plan, in which case we're making no effort and there's just no light for us. There's no guiding light. And
No
so
light.
really having a plan that your key leaders have had the opportunity to really engage on and connect that with your employees. I think that is by far required to be able to go on a transformational journey, because it takes a lot of energy. And so I think those are all important pieces to really inspire and bring up that energy level Because again, why would you invest in that as an employee? Why would I invest in discomfort unless there's some type of understanding on the why and inspiration that goes with it? Those would be my personal views.
That's excellent.
That is
Sandi, you
excellent.
got anything else to add to the magnificence of what we've just discussed this morning? And we couldn't land on a better promo for executive coaching. So thanks for that,
Oh my
Cara.
gosh. Yeah. Fantastic. I love it. The clarity, and Jen would tell you, you see her book in the back, a little shameless plug for Jen's book on own up and accountability. It's a great book. Talk about, conversations and accountability or conversations, and you can't get anywhere without clarity. So important. I love the fact that the intentionality of it, and the intentionality is, to me, sort of lends to that longevity. So it's going to stick with your organization. And the other is that connection, that connection point, top down, cross functionally, that seems to be happening within your organization, which is, I just think, fantastic and just so refreshing to hear.
Yeah. And let's not forget, it hinges on the top team, right? It just hinges on the top team, and they've got to get it together and keep it together. And had the opportunity to have a conversation with Alan Mulally. I don't know if you know who he is. He ran Ford when it was 17 billion in the hole and turned it around. And it was an 8-year transformation. And it's very much about the a guy and gal who sit at the top, who set the intention, who support your vision, Cara, who bring that in, who resource you, and who hold everyone accountable on that top team. No exceptions. And that's the thing that anchors it down really hard, just behaviorally, right? That guy being able to tell his team, here's how we roll. And if you're not down, where would you like to roll out to? So anyway.
I think the other piece of that, and before I just wrap up, is just to note that you've gone through a CEO change during this journey as well. And that consistency has remained. So it's a really good news story. I'm going to let you wrap up, only because I completely forgot to introduce us I was so excited.
Yeah, so at the end, it's me and Jen Long from Own Up in Denver talking to Sandi Verrecchia from Satori Consulting in Toronto, Canada. And we've just had a really great opportunity to talk to Cara Cameron about her transformational leadership strategy, how she's going about it. And we thank you for your time. We want your comments. Please share this out to other people who you think it might help. We hope this has been helpful for you. We'd love to hear from you, and we will talk to you next time on OT Kung Fu. Peace out.
Thank you so much for listening. You can check out Sandi's website at satoriconsultinginc.ca. That's SATORI consultinginc.ca. And visit Jen's website at own-up.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.